Hello, friends. Imagine a life that, on the surface, looks absolutely perfect. You are 28 years old, you have a prestigious medical degree, you work as a dentist at one of Mumbai's most historic hospitals, KEM Hospital, and you live in the upscale neighborhood of Worli. To the outside world, you have made it. You are part of the city's elite. But what if I told you that behind the closed doors of a luxury apartment, this perfect life was actually a suffocating chamber of secrets, political power plays, and relentless psychological torture? On November 22, 2025, the body of Dr. Gauri Palve Garje was found in her flat in Worli, Mumbai. At first glance, the police and her husband called it a suicide. But within hours, a much darker narrative began to emerge. A narrative involving a high-profile political aide, a secret past life, and a family demanding justice for what they call a cold-blooded murder. Today, we are going to peel back the layers of this case. We will look at the timeline, the forensic questions, and the terrifying reality of domestic abuse in high-society India. Was this a young doctor giving up on life, or was she silenced because she knew too much? Let's analyze this. The location of this tragedy is significant. We are talking about Worli, the heart of Mumbai's financial and political power. This isn't a remote village where crimes can be easily hidden. This happened in a bustling urban hub under the nose of the Mumbai police. Dr. Gauri was not just any victim. She was a BDS-qualified professional, a woman with a voice. Her husband, Anant Garje, was an engineer at MADA and, more importantly, a personal aide to a powerful minister, Pankaj Amant. This connection is crucial because, in India, when politics mixes with police investigations, the truth often gets buried under layers of influence. The initial report stated she died by suicide on a Saturday, November 22nd. But when her parents, the Ashok Palve family, arrived, they didn't see a woman who had given up. They saw a daughter who had been fighting a war in her own home. They saw injuries. They remembered the frantic phone calls. And they immediately pointed the finger at Anant and his siblings, Sheetal and Hale and Ajay Garje. This wasn't just a marital dispute gone wrong. This was, according to them, a systematic elimination. To understand the why, we have to go back to the when. The story begins fairly recently, on February 7, 2025. It was a typical, grand Indian wedding. Gauri, a bright, ambitious dentist, married Anant Garje. On paper, Anant was a great catch, a government engineer with MADA and a man with access to the corridors of power. For a middle-class family, this looked like a secure future. But psychology tells us that abusers are often experts at wearing a mask of sanity in public. The cracks in this marriage didn't take years to appear. They appeared within days. According to the police FIR and the statements given by Gauri's family, the harassment began almost immediately after the honeymoon phase should have started. This wasn't just about adjustment issues, it was about control. The family alleges that Anant, along with his sister Sheetal and brother Ajay, started mentally pressuring Gauri. But the real turning point, the moment that shattered the foundation of this marriage, happened when the couple was shifting houses. While packing and moving, Gauri stumbled upon something that Anant had deeply buried. She discovered irrefutable evidence of Anant's past. It turns out, Anant allegedly had a serious extramarital affair in 2021 with a woman from Latur. And this wasn't just a fling. Reports suggest this woman was pregnant. This revelation devastated Gauri. She realized that her marriage was built on a lie. When she confronted Anant, instead of apologizing or seeking counseling, the dynamic shifted to something psychologists call DARVO, deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender. Anant didn't just deny it. He reportedly weaponized his own life against her. He started threatening self-harm. He told her that if she spoke about his affair or tried to leave, he would kill himself and leave a suicide note blaming her for his death. This is a classic, brutal manipulation tactic. It traps the victim. Gauri was a doctor. She was trained to save lives. Anant used her own empathy against her, trapping her in a cycle of fear. She couldn't leave because she was afraid he would frame her, and she couldn't stay because the abuse was escalating. By September 2025, the verbal abuse had transformed into physical aggression. The flat in Worli had become a war zone. Gauri was isolated. Anant's political work kept him powerful and connected, while Gauri was slowly being broken down. The involvement of Anant's siblings, Sheetal and Ajay, suggests that this wasn't just one man losing his temper. It was a family unit allegedly ganging up on the daughter-in-law to keep her silent about the family secrets. They knew that if Gauri exposed Anant's affair and his behavior, his reputation as a political aide and a government officer would be destroyed. The motive here starts to become clear. It wasn't just hatred, it was fear of exposure. Gauri had the power to ruin Anant's social and professional standing. In criminology, we often look for the trigger event that leads to the final crime. For Gauri and Anant, the tension was building up like a pressure cooker throughout the rainy season of 2025. The arguments were no longer just about the affair, they were about Gauri's survival. And on October 3, 2025, that pressure cooker finally exploded in a way that left physical proof for the world to see. Friends, in almost every major crime involving domestic violence, there is a point of no return. A moment where the conflict spills out from the private sphere into the physical world. For Dr. Gauri and Anant, that date was October 3, 2025. Investigations reveal that on this day, the verbal arguments turned into a violent physical altercation. Gauri sustained visible injuries to her face and neck. Now, think about the psychology here. Gauri was a professional dentist working at KEM Hospital. She had to interact with patients and colleagues daily. Visible marks on her face would have been impossible to hide, signaling that Anant's need for control had overtaken his fear of social embarrassment. This wasn't just a fight. It was a physical manifestation of the toxicity that had been brewing since the discovery of his affair. But there is a startling detail about this October timeframe that makes this case extremely complex. When the police later examined Anant, they didn't just find a man who was grieving. They found a man who was battered. The police reports indicate that Anant had approximately 28 fresh injury marks on his body. This is a massive revelation. It suggests one of two scenarios. Either Gauri fought back fiercely in self-defense during these altercations, or there was a violent struggle that both parties were engaged in. It disrupts the narrative of a passive victim and paints a picture of a household in total chaos. If Anant was sustaining injuries, it proves that the conflict was violent, physical, and mutual, destroying the possibility that everything was normal before the death. From October 3 to November, the situation in the Worli flat likely became a ticking time bomb. The family alleges that during this period, Anant and his family, Sheetal and Ajay, continued their relentless pressure. The threat wasn't just physical, it was existential. Remember the threat Anant made about committing suicide and blaming Gauri? That sword was hanging over her head every single day. Psychologically, this is known as coercive control. It paralyzed Gauri. She was likely terrified that if she went to the police, Anant would carry out his threat, destroying her career and her family's reputation with a fictional suicide note. This period of silence leading up to November 22 was not peace. It was the calm before a storm. Then came Saturday, November 22, 2025. The timeline brings us to the tragic climax. Inside that upscale Worli apartment, Dr. Gauri Palve Garje breathed her last. When the news broke, Anant immediately projected the narrative of suicide. He claimed she had taken her own life. However, when the police arrived at the scene, the atmosphere was heavy with suspicion. The flat, usually a symbol of their urban success, was now a crime scene. The police took custody of the body and sent it for a post-mortem, but the immediate reaction from Gauri's parents changed the trajectory of the entire case. They didn't buy the suicide story for a second. Following the discovery of the body, the events moved rapidly. Anant didn't stay to mourn quietly. The pressure was mounting. By November 24, 2025, just 2 days after the death, Anant Garje surrendered to the police at midnight. This surrender is significant. Usually, an innocent, grieving husband cooperates from the comfort of his home. But Anant's movement, his surrender and subsequent arrest, indicates that he knew the legal net was closing in. The Worli police, recognizing the high-profile nature of the case and the involvement of a political aide, wasted no time. They registered an FIR under strict sections of the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita. The charge wasn't just accidental death. They slapped charges of abetment to suicide, insult, and criminal intimidation. But as Gauri's father looked at his daughter's body, he demanded more than just an abetment charge. He demanded a murder investigation. Friends, After the tragic discovery of Dr. Gauri's body and Anant's midnight surrender, the machinery of the Indian legal system finally kicked into gear. But this is where the story gets even more complicated. The Worli police didn't just treat this as a standard suicide case. Recognizing the severity of the allegations and the high-profile nature of the accused, they immediately registered an FIR. They invoked specific sections of the new Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita. Specifically, they charged Anant under Section 108(5) for abetment of suicide, Section 352 for intentional insult, and Section 351(2) for criminal intimidation. These aren't minor charges. Section 108(5) is particularly serious. It implies that Anant's actions were so cruel, so relentless, that they left Dr. Gauri with no option but to end her life. It validates the family's narrative that this was a death caused by psychological torture. However, standard interrogation wasn't enough. The police realized that Anant, being an educated engineer and a politically connected individual, might be withholding crucial information. To break through his defense, the Mumbai police formed a special investigation team. This is a major move. An SIT is usually reserved for complex, sensitive cases. Reports indicate that the SIT is planning to conduct polygraph tests and narcoanalysis tests on the accused. For those who don't know, a narco test involves injecting a truth serum that lowers a person's inhibitions, making it difficult for them to lie. This suggests that the investigators believe there is a deeper layer of truth, perhaps about the timeline of November 22nd or the extent of the physical altercation that Anant is hiding. They are looking for the missing link between the harassment and the death. Now, we must address the elephant in the room, the political angle. Anant Garje wasn't just an engineer. He was a personal aide to Maharashtra's Environment Minister, Pankaj Amand. In India, we have seen time and again how political connections can potentially derail or slow down investigations. This is the exact fear haunting Dr. Gauri's parents. The Ashok Pav family has publicly demanded that the case be transferred to the Central Bureau of Investigation. They argue that the local police might come under pressure to protect a minister's aide. This demand for a CBI probe highlights a massive trust deficit. When a victim's family feels they cannot get justice from the local system because of the accused VIP status, it reveals a systemic rot. The police are now walking a tightrope. They have to prove that their investigation is unbiased, transparent, and immune to political calls. This case forces us to confront a harsh reality about our society. We often assume that domestic violence only happens in uneducated or poor households. But Dr. Gauri was a dentist at KEM Hospital. Anant was a government engineer living in a posh Worli flat. They were the picture of urban success. Yet, behind the curtains, there was abuse, manipulation, and violence. The 28 injuries on Anant, the bruises on Gauri, and the mental torture over an extramarital affair tell us that education does not inoculate you against toxicity. Dr. Gauri spent her days fixing people's smiles, but in her own home, she was allegedly robbed of hers. As the forensic reports from the post-mortem are awaited, the entire city of Mumbai holds its breath. Will this be written off as just another suicide, or will the evidence prove that this was, as the family claims, a cold-blooded murder disguised as despair?